Hello, mortals. We are your Valkyries,
Miss Darby
and Miss Charlie, and we are two lusty, learned ladies from the dark beyond, here to enchant your mortal minds with our witchy wisdom. A second time.
Just like you nasty girl.
We'll be discussing our experiences and opinions on sex work, art, and the erotic taboo counterculture we just can't stop talking about. We are currently recording and transmitting this episode from our opulent spaceship of fiendish fun. Welcome to the Babes of Valhalla.
Content may not be suitable if you are underage, closed-minded, or immature. We discuss topics that are graphic and sexual in nature.
In our last episode, we introduced the book Witches, Sluts, Feminists, Conjuring the Sex Positive by author Kristen J. Sollee, illustrations by Coz Conover. We recommend listening to part 1 before listening to part 2. It'll make so much more sense. In this episode, we'll be continuing our conversation from episode 1. Plus, we have a special treat. We reached out to Kristen and Coz for comments on the process of creating this book, and we are so excited to end this episode with the responses they sent in. Let the show begin. Ooh, I'm excited to talk about this next thing, Darby, because you're going to be talking about craft. And if anyone should know something about Darby and I, so we are crafty people. We are crafty witches for sure. Give us some knitting needles any day.
Yeah, seriously. When we lived together, the crafting material was insane. Yeah, it probably is good that we both had to move states away so that we could get rid of stuff, because I don't even know. We had, and I'm sure currently both have quite the collection. We both have rooms for our crafts. So
I'm in that room right now.
Okay, so the last thing we wanted to talk about was the Coven, Crafting Feminist Community. So I loved this chapter, and I mean, I know I connected with the entire book. So, okay, it's talking about basically kind of women seeking the company of other women. What is a coven? What is a coven doing? And I just thought that, one, I have always felt like I wanted to create community, whether that was teaching belly dance classes, whether that was, finding that in the strip club, whether that was creating a coven. And Charlie and I have actually been talking about this a lot because we both have been getting really involved in our witchy extracurriculars. I don't even know what you'd want to call it, but we've both kind of committed to that as a
practice,
religious source.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. As a spiritual practice. And we've been talking about creating a coven. And I think that, I don't know if all women feel this way, but I definitely know that I'm always looking for a female-dominated community where it kind of feels like a safe space to talk about anything, commiserate, laugh, talk about talk about so many things that women just deal with that are not seen as appropriate topics of discussion in public spaces or around men. So, for example, breastfeeding, body hair, periods, sex, any of those things, just talking about awkward, weird female issues, whether they're health issues or, it's one of those things where sometimes you think you can have that conversation with your partner or with a guy friend or in a space where you say, oh, this happened to me the other day. And someone will come to you and you'll hear kind of these same shitty things. Oh, well, what were you wearing? Or, well, what did, well, that's not that bad. He probably meant it this way. And those things I think generally come from men. So it's nice sometimes to be in a room full of women where I can say, this guy pulled up to the side of the street the other day and said, hey, sweetie, can you give me directions? And I said, my name is not Sweetie. And then we can all laugh about it instead of a guy being like, well, maybe he really was just asking for directions. Well, maybe I don't want to be called sweetie. So it's one of those types of things, but then also kind of looking to celebrate and like worship the goddess, like the inner and outer goddess, you know, exchange ideas, crafts, create. And when I say like inner and outer goddess, I mean inner goddess as in the goddess that exists within all of us, and the outer goddess as in the goddess, you know, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call it, but kind of celebrating female energy and female power and doing things that are, crafty. And I know that sewing and knitting and all those things kind of have these domestic vibes to them, but for those of us that truly do enjoy doing those types of things, it's so nice to get together with a bunch of women, hang out together, you know, do some crafty stuff, just have some girl talk. And we both have recently talked about kind of creating our own little covens because, you know, we don't live close together. So we kind of have like 2 little girl gangs, which we've always kind of had a girl gang. We didn't call it a coven, but we had things that, you know, maybe our rituals were tequila shots. But, I mean, we always had like a group of girls that we really hung out with all the time and kind of did stuff with and kind of did have like ritual, like things that we did. They just might have not been as refined as
I don't
they
know.
are
I
now.
feel like, we had our own rituals.
Oh, definitely.
Sure.
Definitely. But now we're talking about covens in a different way and, you know, quote unquote girl gangs. Yes. And so we have one coven that is cross country. And we have all of our, you know, female sisters that are in different states and different areas, and we kind of connect with them when we can. And then we're also trying to create that in the places that we live. So I have like a group of girls that I'm currently doing, you know, celebrating the Sabbats with, and you're building that as well where you're living. And I have never, you know, when I lived in Florida, I felt like that was completely lacking for me. And I couldn't find my home there because I couldn't find my girl gang.
I remember when I very first met you, and I never had a close relationship with a group of girls before that point. I only had maybe like 1 or 2 female friends, and the rest of my friends were men. And when I met you, we were in a dance group together with, I don't know, like 8 other women. Well, we were young, so we were 8 other girls. And there was this sense of community that was so different from what I was used to. Like, we had our friends, but this wasn't about, like, we didn't even have to know each other that well, but we all stuck up for each other anyway. Like, we were just dancing together at the time after school, but no matter what, like if somebody would come into our dance room, we'd tell them, you know, all the girls would be like, get the fuck out together. You know, it was like a unanimous thing. And I was like so amazed because I'd never been in a space where there was so many strong girls, like all standing up together, even though we weren't best friends and we all came from different like friend groups, but it didn't matter. Like that was our space and that was our gang, and we were protecting it. And slowly that group of girls did turn into our girl gang, and that sense of like protection and like love and like ride or die attitude only grew to the point where, you know, we would have done anything for each other. And that's such like a unique and beautiful thing to have that, because I don't know, I feel like even when I have connections with men, like I have some really amazing connections with men, but when I'm in a group of like 5 women, you just feel exactly like some guy's gonna drive up, say something, and they're all just gonna flip them off, and you don't need to explain it. It doesn't have to be a conversation. You can be like, what a fucker, go away. And they all got your back, and that's the end of the conversation. And something so powerful in that.
100%. I totally agree. And I do think it's important to have community. You know, I don't know how men feel. Again, not a man, don't ever want to be, but as a woman, I definitely feel like having that community and finding a way to create it, and call it whatever you want, girl gang, coven, it doesn't matter. Making time and space for that, I think, is really important, because I have a friend of mine who just had her third son. So she has 3 boys and a husband. She's the only woman in the whole house. And we were talking the other day, and she said to me, we're talking about, I was like, well, do you want to have another kid? Do you want to have a girl? And she was like, I don't know. I think I'm okay with only 3 right now. Maybe that'll change. And she said that she's having a conversation with her oldest son. Mind you, she has 3 under 3 right now. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 3 under 3.
She's an insane person.
Props to her.
I know. She's an insane person. But she's talking to her. So I'm saying her oldest. When I say her oldest son, he's 3, or he's like 2.5, maybe 3. And he was doing something, and she said she just got really emotional and just started crying. And she said, you will never understand what it feels like to be me, and how much pain I go through and how much I hurt. Wow. And she said that she's like, it's silly because, my son is 2.5. He doesn't understand what I'm talking about, but I had just given birth to his little brother. And she said, and I realized in that moment, there was never going to be anybody in this house who was going to understand what it felt like to give birth, what it felt like to be a woman, what it felt like to feel those feelings and have those physical and emotional kind of pains that come with that. And I just thought to myself, damn, I would not want to live. Not that if I had only 3 sons ever, I would be pissed, but I just mean that, you got to have a community of someone who can understand, when you're talking about female issues or female, just anything, whether it's, the way you're treated or sexuality or physical things, periods and sex and breastfeeding and cramps. Yeah, you want to, you don't get the kind of comfort from a man when you say, oh, my cramps are really hurting. And they can kind of be like, okay, well, take some aspirin, you'll be fine. And you're looking at them and you want to punch their face out because you're thinking, my body hates me for 5 to 7 days, once a month. I feel like I'm turning inside out and there's a small gremlin living in my uterus. Go fuck yourself. Take some goddamn aspirin. But they just don't get it. They don't understand. So, I mean, just even that, you want to have a group of women, a community that you can talk to, and they can be like, we get it. And they get it. And there's comfort in knowing that somebody else understands. Yeah. And also likes to craft.
No, but there is a certain level of pain that our body goes through being women. And later we will get into that because you and I have both had intense experiences, multiple intense experiences just within our bodies as women. And it's really hard to relate that to somebody who doesn't feel that. And not that they don't try. Like, you can have a really loving, caring community of men, but there is a difference when you have another woman with you, because she understands to a certain degree, like, your body or the difficulties that you can face. And not that all women need to be biological women.
Of course.
There's a lot of other things that we face, and there's a lot of things that we just want a community for, and there's a different energy to somebody who is a woman or identifies as a woman.
Yeah, I mean, even just talking about hair and makeup or clothing or style. I mean, there's, not that that's all we talk about, but there's a million different things that, you definitely don't have to have a period or any of those things to necessarily, to be considered a woman. If you identify as a woman, just like you said, 100%, there's a type of energy that you bring that a man just cannot fulfill. It is not the same thing. There was a great quote in that section, again, about men being afraid, which I am super into. Witches gathering deep in the woods, conjuring mayhem, inspired far more fear than the solitary witches on the prowl. The collective aspects of witchcraft drove witch hysteria. And I love that. I love the imagery that it pops up of just, women in the woods just conjuring mayhem.
Yes.
I just loved it. And I love it too that, I don't know, for me, it connected to me in the sense that my mom always said, if there's two of you, you're less likely to be attacked. So if there's two of you out and you're walking your car at night, there's two of you anywhere, they're not going to pick you off. And I just feel like there's power in numbers. There's power when we stand together. And we kind of talked about this earlier with what you were talking about with the hierarchy. It's, if we can stand together, we have power, and they are afraid of us. And they doesn't necessarily have to just be, cisgendered white men, right? It can be whatever the they is that's working against us.
Exactly.
But they are afraid of us when we are together because we are stronger together. If there's just one of us out and about, even if we're on the prowl, as this quote says, we can be picked off. But together, we are a united force. And I love that because I think that with everything that's going on, I mean, not just now, but, we haven't had the vote for that long. We haven't had the same freedoms for that long. We still experience, misogyny and violence, and we live in a patriarchal society, and we're still fighting against that every day. But we're working towards it, and we're coming together. We're finding new ways. We're going to figure it out, and I do truly believe that, whether it's in my lifetime or the next. But I just love this imagery that it's if we can come together, if we can create covens, if we can connect girl gangs all over the place, we can, be a force to be reckoned with. And I just love that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. I love that too. I think that is fantastic. And I love the imagery. I'm so drawn to like the practice, but also the aesthetics of witchcraft.
Totally.
Just like women working in the woods at night around like a bonfire, wearing like just nothing but like black see-through lace gowns. Like, oh,
no,
Jesus.
I totally agree.
Yes.
And the fact that this is like a spiritual practice that has a craft for every holiday. And I mean, okay, I'm sorry. A hand turkey does not count. So all of you people out there going, well, there's Thanksgiving crafts, there's St. Patrick's Day crafts. Those are bullshit. We get to make cool little corn husk dollies and all different types of things. But I just love it that every single holiday or Sabbath has an intention and a craft, multiple crafts, and a baking thing. And it's all about, it's seasonal. It's about the earth.
My altar is always being switched out with like handmade items that we make on each Sabbath. And it also feels good to make something, and as you make it, you're like holding an intention, and then when it's created, it's like your spell is completed because you've crafted it into this object, and then you place it on the center of your altar. And I don't know, it does the job for me. It makes me feel good. It makes 100%. Me feel like I'm working some sort of
So then
energy.
What do you do with your creations? Do you keep them forever?
Usually when I'm cleaning off the mantle to put like the next Sabbaths, like I change it out every Sabbath. I put a new display up. I will take everything off that I have crafted, especially if it's like temporary things, and I will burn them.
Cool. I love it.
Yeah. I might keep some stuff, but at the same time, like so much of it is like made out of natural materials, and I don't want to just have like boxes and boxes and boxes of like little handmade natural material things. If I make something that's more substantial, I'll keep it. But when it's like, I have a lot of things that I've like woven out of natural materials or created, I'll just burn them. Oh, I have one quote I was going to share before we finished up. I just thought this was so relevant to us and into sex work in general. This is a quote taken from the section Political Witch, Rebellion and Revolution. And this is from Jex Blackmore, who is part of the Satanic Temple, which is actually more of a political movement than a spiritual belief. And if you would like to know more about that, please do research. It's very fascinating. But Jax Blackmore is interviewed about the aesthetics of resistance. And I just love what she says. She says, you kind of have to aestheticize your work to touch on a cultural pulse that people respond to. I can see other movements that lack that feature, and I feel like they could be much more successful if they could employ a powerful aesthetic. So I love this because she's referring to the Satanic Temple and how they have this strong aesthetic when they do their political marches and how their aesthetic brings them this power. But I was thinking about sex work because in the sex work industry it has such this distinct look to it. Like every field has like a very distinct look of like how we imagine people in that world to look and the aesthetics around it. But also I wanted to talk about us, you and me, and our podcast. And how I thought, when we were first thinking of this podcast, we created a strong aesthetic and a strong backstory because we wanted to create this beautiful platform to create our story on top of, and how it helps promote our ideas and our concepts by finding the right colors, finding the right textures, finding the right imagery that we feel like promotes our ideas without us having to say anything.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's fun.
It's so much fun.
And it's fun to create beautiful things.
And it is fun. And I think you and I really value design. So totally. We wouldn't just want oh, we'll just, put whatever up. No, we're gonna make all the artwork ourselves.
Well, I think that's why it took us forever and ever and ever to start this project, because we knew we wanted to do it, but we didn't have an idea of exactly what, we knew what we were going to talk about, but what was it going to look like? What was the concept? And then once we kind of figured that out, it sort of came together.
Yeah, it's how we wanted to deliver our message, and it's important.
Yeah.
To present it beautifully.
No, definitely.
I just thought it was so interesting.
I agree. I 100% agree. And I think aesthetic is really important to us in our own life. Even though I wouldn't say that you and I dress up every day, because we definitely don't. But when we do, we put a lot of effort into it, and we like doing those things, and we think a lot about what that says and presenting ourselves in a certain way.
In sex work, when you're creating your persona, you do the same thing. You find your aesthetic, if you're a stripper, there's some basic rules you're already going to follow. The outfits have a style, the makeup and the hair usually have a style, the fingernails have a style, the shoes have a style. But then within that, how are you going to personalize it? What kind of character are you? What colors do you go towards? How do you personalize each tiny element? And there's such this strong aesthetic that goes with dancers too. The amount of costume changes some people do that no one will ever notice is insane, but it's the dancers are helping feed that character and that aesthetic throughout the night.
And how we would know who was on stage based on the music that's playing. Oh, that's so-and-so's music.
Oh, absolutely.
We already know. And when they get on stage, it brings a certain feeling, oh, this is, the girl that always dances to metal, and she has the Satanist tattoos, and she always wears red and black.
Yes.
And she has crazy hair.
Yes.
And then there's, here's the baby doll girl who kind of has this little cutie pastel thing, and she always dances to classic top 100. Yeah. So my question for you, Charlie, at the end of our episode is, what does the word witch mean to you in your own life?
Witch to me means understanding the underlying power that everything has, and instead of ignoring it or overlooking it, trying to work with it. And sometimes that's going to be very successful, and sometimes it's not going to be successful at all. And some people might just think of that as positive thinking, but I like to think of it as witchcraft. It's just drawing on that energy that you get from, waking up and seeing the sunshine, or the sun going down and seeing the moon, or going into work and feeling, the beat of the music. There's this energy to life. There's this energy to being outside in nature and trying to intentionally do something with that. And I think that a lot of people do that without even thinking about it, and they don't consider it witchcraft. They just consider it, I'm just doing some intentional, practices, or I'm just enjoying, the sunshine, or I'm just, having wishful thinking, or even meditation. I think in a lot of ways, that's what I would consider witchcraft. What about you, Darby?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's recognizing and trying to understand your connection to your surroundings, celebrating nature, celebrating things that, give us life, nourishment, physically, emotionally, spiritually, giving thanks to those things, kind of reminding yourself that you are, I think a religion does this for a lot of people, but reminding yourself that you are one being in the entire huge, humongous universe, in the spectrum of history, which makes you small, but then also understanding that, all the things that you do have power and matter. It's this weird, I don't know, gray area between those two things. And I think just, the word witch is this identity that encapsulates those things, and it's someone that isn't afraid to do those things and spend time on those things. I don't know, someone who prioritizes maybe that. I think talked about before, living in a capitalist society that's just full of consumerism, and how often we're consuming and not giving or using our natural surroundings, or giving thanks to kind of our natural surroundings, and even people in our life that are amazing and matter to us. And I like that a lot of the Sabbats kind of have a lot of prompts for reflection. So it's not just at Thanksgiving or Christmas, but it's kind of all the time.
Yeah.
All right, so what about the word slut?
Whew. That is a loaded question. I think the word slut is a word used to identify someone who is sexually empowered, who's sexually curious, who's sexually excited. It's been a word that has been, used to shame, and has now been turned into a word to use to celebrate. I think that now the word slut can mean, a person who chooses to own their sexuality.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I know that it came from somewhere very different.
Yeah.
That's a hard one, but what about you?
For me, the word slut, I definitely identify with it, because I think that working in the industry, little civvies, especially women, tend to want to tell you that you are being slutty, or they want to kind of make it sound like women who are profiting off of their sexuality are quote unquote sluts, like it's a bad thing. And so for me, I would agree in the sense of what you said, that it's a powerful word where it's being reclaimed, and I connect to it in the sense it's yes, someone who uses their sexuality as a tool, who, whether it's to gain pleasure, where it's to give pleasure, whether it's to explore those types of things, whether it's to make money, it doesn't matter. For they are aware of the power of their sexuality and they are not afraid to wield it. And I think that that's an important thing because I don't think that women are empowered to use their sexuality. I think we are taught to be afraid of it, to be ashamed of it, or to kind of cover it or keep it in some weird covenant for some special someone, instead of recognizing that it is a strong kind of force within us that can be used to kind of empower us and lift us up. So slut for me is a very positive word now at this time in my life. I don't think it has always been that word for me, but I think now definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think that for a lot of people, slut, just because we're in a modern time does not mean slut means a positive thing. I think that there is a movement of women who, and men, who are reclaiming that word in a positive way and using it as a title to express their like the rejection of the term in its negative form, and to celebrate the fact that they are exploring their sexuality. But it's still very painful for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think the way that it's used too, and who's saying it to you. So then what about the word feminist?
Feminist?
Do you get where I'm going now?
I had a feeling you were going to go to feminist. I feel like the feminist movement still has a ways to go, right? There's still a lot of subsections within feminism. And it needs to get past that. There's a lot, and we should do a whole episode about feminism and sex work, because there's a lot of issues between the two. There's a lot of feminism or feminists that are anti-sex work and don't think that women who sell their bodies in any way, shape, or form are feminists, and that they're actually like working towards like the male agenda. So
or that we're all victims.
Exactly. We're like feeding into the patriarchy, and yeah,
we're co-conspirators of the patriarchy.
I think feminism is finding power in the fact that you're a woman and understanding that men and women are different. Like, we have talked about that a lot on this podcast in past episodes already, is that there are differences in male and female energy. There just are, and like conversations, and our brains are different, our bodies are different, but that doesn't mean that our equal access to jobs should be different, you know? It shouldn't mean that
pay.
Yeah, our pay should be different. It shouldn't mean that, you know, some of us don't get equal opportunity to represent ourselves in the courtroom or anywhere. And that is where I think feminism is important, is finding those equal opportunities in those places. Not necessarily that we need to be seen as the same as men, because we are not men, but taking away those boundaries that permit us from achieving the same things in relationships, in the workplace, in our personal lives as men.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and I think that we should definitely do an episode about feminism and sex work, because I do feel like for a long time I felt like very strong in my convictions of being a feminist, and that working longer in the sex industry and kind of educating myself on SWERFs and, you know, extremist feminists who don't include sex workers was really painful for me to understand that there was a whole group of women who specifically, a whole group of feminists, who specifically did not support the women who participate in the sex industry.
I've run into that issue multiple times talking to people. Like, well, how could you consider yourself a feminist? And that's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I don't understand how anyone can even almost ask that question, because it just seems so backwards. But there are truly people out there who believe that, yeah, you can't participate in sex work and be a feminist. And I think that that's really damaging, because there's also people who exclude women that are trans, who exclude women of color. We kind of talked about this earlier. And so for me, feminists and feminism, I still believe in it and connect with it. But for me personally, if it's not intersectional and including sex work, women of color, women with disabilities, and trans women, then it's 100% not feminism. When we started this episode, we reached out to both Kristen and CozCon to ask a few questions about the book. And both Charlie and I were super nervous because we are like a small podcast swirling around in the universe, and we think that they are amazing, talented individuals who create beautiful things. And we didn't think, we wouldn't have been upset at all if they hadn't gotten back to us, but they actually got back to us really quickly. And I think we were kind of fangirling out a little bit because we were both really nervous even reaching out to them because they're just awesome.
And times are very crazy right now, and things can just be difficult in general. So we are so appreciative and so excited to feature our interviews with both Kristen and CozCon. For Kristen's interview, she ended up just writing us back. So Darby and I will be reading the questions and responses. And for CozCon, he replied with voice recording. So we will be reading our interview questions and then playing his recorded answers.
Darby, myself, will be reading the questions, and Charlie will be reading the responses that Kristen sent us. So question number 1. Your book, Witches, Sluts, and Feminists, feels to us that it speaks to a very specific audience. What in your personal experience inspired you to explore this particular relationship between these three identities?
I view myself as a channel or a conduit and as a curator. So to me, Witches, Sluts, Feminists is more of a collection of ideas and philosophies and histories that all have been cycling through our psyche, or even the collective unconsciousness. It is not my story per se, but at the same time, I absolutely identify with all three labels for a very long time, and still very much do, both publicly and privately. So the book draws on my personal experiences and convictions, and hopefully those who also identify in these ways feel that when they read it. However, I am pretty stoked when those outside my target audience get a hold of this book. For example, a friend of mine gave it to his father, who's a minister, and it was used in a Bible study seminar. There's a lot of folks who need to hear this story who aren't witches, sluts, or feminists. Yet.
You write about and talk to a lot of people who believe that women are intrinsically magic. Do you feel that all people have access to this kind of expression?
Absolutely. There's nothing about magic that is distinct to any single gender expression. I choose to highlight women and folks of the feminine spectrum because there is a unique history correlating femininity with witchcraft. But there is so much more about witchcraft and magic that I wasn't able to cover.
Who are the contemporary figures in the witch-slut community that you admire and or inspire you?
Brie Luna, the mastermind behind Hood Witch, Tamara Santibanez for their activism and artistry, Morgan Claire Siren, who created the Slutist Tarot. There's so many it's impossible to narrow down.
Thank you, Kristen, so much for responding to our questions and the time that it took. You can find Kristen J. Sollee at kristensollee.com and on Instagram at Kristen Corvette, Korveette. Next up, we have the voice recordings from CozCon, or Anthony Conover.
How did you come up with these images? Did Kristen give you prompts, or did you read the chapters before starting?
When Kristen had contacted me, she had references in mind or concepts in mind, and also sent me an excerpt from the book. And so I was able to kind of read and see kind of the tone and where she was coming from, and also look up the references and get kind of a vibe for kind of where she wanted it to go. and kind of, just like a jump off point for the images in general.
How did you connect the terms witch, slut, and feminist? Did this play into your illustrations?
In terms of my relationship with feminist, slut, witch, I feel like I see that all of those things are deeply woven into not only our psychology, and not just culture, but the history of man, quote unquote, humans, mankind. But these are the only true constants, right? Aside from the biological flesh, bone, muscle, nervous system, all of that stuff. When we talk about the psychological and the spiritual, those things are ever present. If we talk about matriarchal societies, if we talk about the ability to reproduce, if we talk about the repercussions of suppression, right? All of these things are constant. And when we talk about sex, when we talk about slut, those are things that are in one way or another pinpointing a thing that people are afraid of, which is wielding power. To be a witch, to be a feminist, to be a slut is seeing a power that is inherent and being able to connect with it and not be afraid of it, but to move with it, to see the ways that it's empowering, the ways that it makes you connected to things. And people are afraid of that. People are afraid of people who see what they have. It's the same thing with when we talk about white supremacy and we talk about the fear that, white people have with black people. It's because there's a magic that comes from oppression. You have no choice but to see your power. You have no choice but to see what tools you're working with to overcome these things. And that's terrifying. Women and female-bodied people and people who are connected to the divine feminine, they are tapped into a frequency that is so massive and so powerful, and that's terrifying. What's more terrifying than somebody who's in connection to their body and sees that there's zero division between their body and the earth around them? To be a witch means to be connected to those things. It means to look to a tree and see that it is surging with life and an energy that is literally no different than yours. You both empower each other. You both feed energy to each other. So when I think of those words, I do think that they're all connected and they all have to do with power. They all have to do with an inherent connectivity.
What did you use as your inspiration for the characters you illustrated for the book? We especially loved all the different clothes and accessories. Each character had a very unique personality.
When it comes to the style of the illustrations, so much of it is just kind of built into my psychology. Like when I sit down to draw, that's all the stuff that's coming to the table. My love for fashion, my love for women and femmes in general. When I was growing up, like that's the kind of thing that informed everything. I mean, the way that I am now, the inflection, the posture, all of those things are kind of in some way an emulation of like the women in films and in cartoons. All of that stuff is just built inside of me. And then fashion is such a huge thing for me. I love it so deeply, and so referencing McQueen and Rei Kawakubo and Gareth Pugh, and then the things that just kind of came. Oh, and Thierry Mugler. Mixed with just general kind of references, leather work and BDSM and things like the nipple tassels, like all that kind of stuff is just in my head, and it just takes somebody to give me that free reign or to give me a context, and then those things just come to mind. I think people who, in every way, I mean, pretty much in every skill, I mean, people who are great with math, people who are great with connectivity with history, all of those things, those all are a form of magic. And I think like maybe one of the most straightforward versions of that are artists. I think musicians and painters and sculptors and illustrators, it's so much about just channeling. It's channeling something. It's channeling whatever's going on in your brain with something outside of you, and somehow your body is just able to translate it. And that's kind of how it feels when I draw. Like, I don't know how I know how to draw. You know, I never went to school, or I never like took classes on it or anything. It's just something that I was drawn to do. And when I sit down to draw, I don't really know what's going to happen. I just know that I want it to be in some way a reflection of what I love. And so Kristen was already familiar with my work. And so when she wanted me to do illustrations for this book, she already knew kind of like what I was interested in, what I loved. And she is similar. She obviously loves magic, and she loves like feminist icons and femme icons and feminism and sexuality and fashion. And so, I don't know, she like curated this kind of perfect situation, but also gave me just complete free reign. Like, she just trusted that what came from me was going to be aligned with what she wanted for the book, the overall message. But ultimately, I mean, the product of the entire book is like what she cares about and what she loves and what she feels really connected to. So yeah, that, I think no matter what, those things just came out. They're just kind of in my head. And when I sit and draw, that's just the kind of stuff that's already kind of swirling around in my head. And I'm really, really happy to be a part of this book. I'm honored. I think it's something that's really special and something that's really activating for people and freeing for people, and empowers people and makes them feel seen. That book is a book of magic. It is a book that is channeling and calling and calling all of these people that are witches and sluts and feminists. It's making them, maybe even just waking them up to who they really are, or affirming who they are, or speaking to them and saying, yes, like this, everything you think and feel, like I see it too. And here's this book, here's this like basically like this spell book that is both speaking to the people who don't connect with this, and then those of you who do. Maybe this is just learning about your own history, or like this kind of grander bloodline that you're a part of. It takes on so many different versions, and it would be great if like there are people who picked up that book that are illustrators and artists who that it kind of spoke to them on a similar but kind of different level, seeing the visual aspect of it and seeing something that's kind of a companion piece, because that's what things like that do for me. When I open a book and there's like reading material, to have a visual that kind of drives that home, that speaks to something that I really love and care about, it just like it brings those colors even more to life. So if there's any way in which what I drew did that for people, it would mean just that much more to me. I'd be so happy.
Lastly, any words or comments on your experience in creating the illustrations for this book?
If I had to add any last notes, I think it would just be what I generally wish people saw, which is that they're all tapped into this. Being a witch, being a feminist, being a slut is not like some kind of specific aesthetic or listening to some kind of music. You don't need to know every word in the dialogue of the craft or something like that. You didn't have to be a Wiccan, like in high school. None of that is tied to this reality. Being a slut, being a witch, being a feminist, that means being in some way either in control or mindfully open to these things that are already moving through you and are built inside of you. It's not about necessarily taking any kind of action as much as it is stopping and acknowledging what's inside of you already. It's all about seeing yourself, and it's all about being open. I think people sometimes maybe do want to tap into that magic or do want to feel that connection with everything. And I think what gets missed often is it's already there. You know, when you pass trees and you see the movement of the leaves, when you feel the connection with the sun falling on you, when you feel sexually empowered, or you just feel sexually connected, that's a power exchange. That is something that is already written into your veins and your bones, in your bloodline. You are the product of so much energy, positive and negative. Right? Like you're channeling trauma as well as like the survival, the warrior, the hyper kind of in control sexual being. All of that is in you. It's all there. You came into this world with all of that magic and all of that power, be it bodily, psychological, psychic. It's all there. And so I feel like it would be so amazing if people interacted with, I mean, even just my art standing alone, or even just the book, and didn't even connect with the drawings, but kind of saw how people's fear of these things is what creates the negative energy. It's what created the circumstance that so many people across time have experienced, of basically in every way, shape, and form being burned at the stake. You know, we do it now. We do it with slut shaming. We do it with completely suppressing women, femmes, female-bodied people. Every last bit of that is completely built into a psychology of being afraid of power and being afraid of people who have a connection to things that are just so incredibly important, and human nature. So yeah, that's like my last note. Just I hope people are not afraid to acknowledge that not only do they straddle the veil, but like the veil is a perception. There is no division between the other side and this side. They're all one thing. And it just is a matter of opening your eyes.
We'd like to thank Coz Con for responding to our questions. You can find them on Instagram at CozCon, that's CozCon, or on Etsy under Coz Con.
And just thank you both to Kristen and Coz Con for taking the time out of your schedule and your days to get back to us. And
you're cool.
And just,
you're awesome.
Yeah, you're cool. And we appreciate it a lot. And we feel super excited to be able to have this on our podcast in this episode. And we just really appreciate the work that you guys are putting out. And so thank you for being down to be included in our discussion about this book.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to our deep dive onto the book, which is Sluts, Feminists, Conjuring the Sex Positive by Kristen J. Sollee. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it encouraged everyone to go out and buy this book and read it, because it's freaking awesome. And there's so many good little tidbits to get out of this.
It is awesome. And when you're going to go purchase it, you can, of course, get it on the ever-present Amazon, but also try to order it through your local bookstore. Try to find it somewhere small, support your local bookshop, and, fight against capitalism with big, gigantic companies. If anyone listening has books or movies or anything else that they would like us to discuss, send them our way, DM us on Instagram, or you can always email us. So in the meantime, to soothe your aching loins, you can find us on Instagram at Babes of Valhalla. If you'd like to email us or record an anecdote for an upcoming episode, check out our social media for the themes you are currently researching, and send your comments and stories to babesofvalhalla@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
Until next time, stay nasty.
Babes of Valhalla is written and produced by the Babes of Valhalla, otherwise known as your illustrious lieges Darby and Charlie. Music provided by the musical genius Gemini Genesis.